Good afternoon and welcome back to day 2 of the CogX Festival. My name is Anushka Sharma. I'm the founder of tech and space innovation consultancy Nought, and I'm really delighted to be your MC today. As I said, this is the Planet and Smart Cities stage, and let me just give you a run through of what this stage is all about. It's all hands on deck at a time in the fight to persevere our planet. With the COP26 climate talks in November, great headwinds are building for real progress. From clean transport to energy transition, adaptation and resilience, nature-based solutions and finance, we're digging into some of the hottest strands of climate technology. Join us here to hear about the hydrogen decade and how AI can unlock energy networks and open up forest farming, carbon markets, and how the most inspiring artists of our generation are spreading the climate action message. We'd love to have you join the conversation. Get involved online with hashtag CogX2021 and do absolutely send your questions through to our upcoming panel via the Hopin app. With that, our next session today is on energy transition, a digital twin for the energy sector. I'm delighted to welcome our moderator for this session, Pete Clutton-Brock, who's the co-founder at the Centre of AI and Climate. Pete, welcome to the stage. How are you?
I'm good, thanks Anushka. Thank you very much. As Anushka mentioned, I'm Pete Clutton-Brock, co-founder of the Centre for AI and Climate and CEO of Radiance International Consulting. In this session, we're going to be taking a look at why creating digital representations or digital twins of electricity systems can help us achieve zero carbon electricity and how we can go about creating such a representation. I'm extremely lucky to have two experts joining me for this conversation. Sarah Hayes is from the National Digital Twin Programme and Lucy Yu is from the Centre for Net Zero. Sarah, I'm going to start with you to kick things off, if that's okay. It would be great if you could perhaps give a bit of an introduction to yourself and the National Digital Twin Programme, your work on it, and maybe while you're at it, if you could perhaps set the conversation for us and describe what are digital twins, in what situations they're useful, and what principles we should consider when developing them.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Hayes. I'm the outreach lead for the National Digital Twin Programme at the Centre for Digital Built Britain. So this festival asks us the question, how do we get the next 10 years right? And it also, the question I've also heard come up over the last day or so is, how do we collaborate across sectors to solve problems and achieve change? And I think the answer lies in using data in the right way. And at the Centre for Digital Built Britain and in the National Digital Twin Programme, we see connected digital twins as a means of doing that. So what is the National Digital Twin Programme? So it all started with a report, Data for the Public Good. I led the production of that report when I was previously working at the National Infrastructure Commission. And it's a report about the benefits of sharing data. So we found that infrastructure operators across energy, water, transport and telecoms were recognising the benefits of sharing data, but they were finding it very difficult to do so. That it's difficult to share data across sectors. There's no framework. And so we recommended in the report Data for the Public Good that an information management framework be set up to enable the secure sharing of data across sectors to realise these benefits and to achieve the vision for a national digital twin. And a national digital twin is an ecosystem of connected digital twins. And I think what's important to think about here is that we're talking about a system of systems. So we're not just talking about the energy network or the separate transport network or water network. We really need to see economic infrastructure as a system of systems. And then we need to see how it interacts with social infrastructure as well and the natural environment. So we really sort of see this national digital twin as a system of systems and how everything fits together. So what is a digital twin? So a digital twin is a digital representation or a digital model of something. And that something can be in the past, in the present, or in the future. The point is you have data flowing from the physical world through to the digital world. And helping within the digital twin, you can use the data and the insights to help inform decisions that then shape and have an impact on the physical world. So it's all about helping us make better decisions in the real world. And you can have all sorts of digital twins. So you can have descriptive, prescriptive, predictive, autonomous. There's all levels of complexity that you can think about with digital twins. But what is important is who's using these digital twins, the stakeholders. Are they usable? How are people able to get the real benefits out of digital twins to help them make better decisions? And how is a digital twin connected to other digital twins so that we're able to share data across sectors and across organizations? And one thing that it's really important to think about is, what is the purpose of a digital twin? And within the program, we do see that it's very important to have a specific use case for a digital twin. So I'm going to walk through some examples here. If you think about the EV charging network, we need to plan out an EV charging network across the UK, for example. So we can think about use case for digital twin from 3 different perspectives. So we can think about it from the strategy and planning perspective. It would be helpful to develop a digital twin of the EV charging network to help to plan where to put the charging points, and also to see how this fits with the existing transport infrastructure. We can also think about it from another perspective of managing assets. So at the moment, a lot of companies are starting to use digital twins to manage assets, to increase efficiency and to reduce costs. And that's where they really see the benefits coming through. So you could have a digital twin to manage your EV charging points, to assess to monitor the use and efficiency of the charging system as a whole. Then the third perspective is to think about digital twins for assurance. So this EV charging network, you can think about having a digital twin of the network to look at the safety of the network as a whole, or of the individual charging points, or to think about the resilience of the network as a whole. So thinking about the demand and supply of electricity in the future and how we want to balance that as we go electric. When you're developing a digital twin, particularly important to think about guiding principles. So the National Digital Twin Programme has published the Gemini principles. These are available on the Digital Twin Hub. I'll put the link in the chat for that. But these Gemini principles say that digital twins must have a clear purpose, they must be trustworthy, and they must function effectively. And what is really important to consider is that data must be shared on a secure, resilient basis. And that's why we're developing the information management framework to enable the interoperability of data so that we can use data in the right way. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much for that introduction. Interoperability feels like a word that we're going to be talking about more and more in this space. I'm going to hand over to Lucy now. Lucy, I wonder if you could give a bit of background on yourself, a bit of background on the Centre for Net Zero, and if you could also, in this session, we're going to be particularly focused on the creation of a digital twin for the energy/electricity system. It would be great if you could maybe offer a few thoughts on what that could look like, should look like, and what the value is of specifically creating a digital twin for the UK electricity system.
I'm Lucy Yu. I run the Centre for Net Zero. We are an open research lab backed by Octopus Energy, and we are using data-driven modelling and simulation to research and hopefully realise faster, fairer and more affordable paths to net zero. We're focused on the energy transition and closely related areas. So I think in terms of the digital twin questions, maybe just to build on some of the comments that Sarah made, I think Sarah's absolutely right to highlight that we should really think about who are the customers for a digital twin, and what are the use cases, what do we want them to be able to do with a digital twin. I think when it comes to the energy system and some sort of digital twin representation of that system, we maybe see 4 kind of high-level, top-level use cases. I think one would really be around system operation, and so This would really be about transmission distribution system operators having a very clear understanding of the situational awareness of the system at any one point in time. And Sarah talked about making better or making improved decisions. We would agree with that, but I think there's also maybe something there about shifting the burden of who needs to make those decisions. So potentially also to be able to move more towards a future system in which more decisions about system operations can be automated and maybe don't require the level of human input that they perhaps do today. I think for that use case as well, we would also see that as being a particularly valuable product to enable perhaps in the future more smaller actors to take part in that system operation. So that would be one use case. I think a second use case that we could consider would be around really sort of operational readiness and training. And this maybe speaks to the point that Sarah made about system resilience. So I think one of the great benefits about having something like a digital twin is that you can test, simulate different types of scenarios in a safe environment, so you don't have to recreate them or attempt to recreate them in the real world. And so the example of the energy system, this could be, for instance, looking at particularly unusual or extreme weather events or things along those lines. So this could be a great means of training people, training system operators to respond and to react to different types of scenarios. I think a third use case that we see is around policy and market design. So this would really be about really exploring and probing the impacts or the potential impacts of different types of policies, different types of interventions, different types of market structures, and potentially also different types of actors within the energy system. So really being able to explore how these different actors are connected across the system, and to explore the aggregate impacts of different actions, but also potentially to look beneath that aggregate layer and also look at regional, more regional and local impacts as well. And then finally, the sort of fourth category of use case that we could see here, again, speaking to Sarah's point, is really about infrastructure planning and investment. So really considering what are the different scenarios for where infrastructure could be placed or could be enhanced, or where investments could be made, what are the different forecast returns on investments, given a range of scenarios and different options, which should be prioritized, and are there any actions that can be taken that are effectively kind of low or no regrets actions. So those are, I think, a summary of some of the different use cases that we think a digital twin, a representation of the energy system, could be used for, and who the different customers might be in each case.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucy. That's a really good way of getting people all on the same page. And it strikes me with the energy system, you're dealing with a system, perhaps, you know, a market which is quite different from other markets in the sense that it is very centralized. It has a series of centralized actors who are in effect gatekeepers of the way things are done in the marketplace to a large extent. And I guess one of the questions that comes from those four use cases that you highlighted, Lucy, is, you know, are we talking about a single digital twin that works for everybody, or will we be talking about multiple different digital twins with different use cases for different people? So, and what do you think on that, Lucy?
So I think I guess the way that I see this emerging, and I think this speaks to Sarah's earlier point, is that ideally we would think about this as being a kind of federated, I guess, some kind of federated model comprised of lots of smaller parts of the system. So I think Sarah used the phrase system of systems. I think the best way to think about this is lots of different things that can interoperate. if the digital twin were to be designed in this way, then that has the advantage of effectively being able to swap different parts in and out, and potentially to maybe to enhance a particular data set that's informing one part of the twin, or maybe to substitute that data set for another set altogether. So I think we should really be thinking about this as comprised of lots of different components. Different organizations and different people are going to have the underlying data that's needed to effectively to be able to model and simulate that part of the system. So I think the key thing here really is finding some standards, an ability to interoperate all of those things, so that you can effectively, I guess, define the boundary or the locus of the system of interest as broadly as you'd like.
Sarah, great to get your thoughts on this. And we talked about interoperability and I guess perhaps thinking about what the prerequisites for the creation of this federation of interoperable parts that Lucy talked about could be. What do we think, if we're looking to allow for the development of these various digital twins or parts of a digital twin, what can the UK be thinking about? What can different parts of the system be thinking about to allow that to emerge? What are the prerequisites? Is it about data collection? How can we make it happen?
Yeah, okay. So, I think that vision is if we were to have a digital twin of the energy sector in the future, as Lucy's saying, it really is a federation, an ecosystem of connected digital twins within the energy sector. But then, of course, those digital twins need to be able to connect with other digital twins outside of the sector. We don't think of energy just alone. It supports all other parts of the economy. Not to mention transport, for example, you want to see the connections there. So how do we enable those connections? Really, it's about having a common language for sharing data and connecting digital twins. So what we're working on in the National Digital Twin Programme is developing an information management framework, which is this common language for connecting digital twins. And what we're working to achieve is eventually it's a set of standards for sharing data that are agreed, so there's easily consensus, and that's why we also have the Digital Twin Hub, where we're bringing together a community of people who either they own assets that they need digital twins to help them manage those assets, or they're working in the supplier space and they are working on developing digital twins themselves. But it is about having this common language. Which, when you get down to the technical level, it's about having a foundation data model, a reference data library, and an integration architecture to really glue this all together. But it comes down to agreeing that we want to be able to share data across digital twins. That's it's a cultural point as well. It's all very well having the technical approach here, but it really is important to have the right cultural approach and the will to make this happen, because when we are sharing data, we want to make sure that it is done in the right way, that it's done in a secure way, especially when we're talking about the energy sector. A lot of critical national infrastructure there. We want to make sure that data is accessed in the right way. We talk about role-based access, so people in certain roles having access to that data is part of putting this whole framework together.
Lucy, do you have any thoughts on this? And obviously, Octopus, coming from your link from Octopus, there's a lot of data that you can draw on there. What's your take on how data can and should be shared better to allow for the emergence of digital twins?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think in an ideal world, as much data would be just openly available as possible. In reality, there are maybe reasons why that's not achievable for in every case, and maybe that's in some cases it might be commercial sensitivity, in some cases it might be concerns around security, and there may be a range of reasons. I think what we need to find is governance models that can still enable some utility there. So, that could be that if you have a part of a digital twin, if you have a particular component and that interacts with somebody else's component in some way, then perhaps there are structures whereby the interaction can kind of occur at the interface between those two parts, but actually you don't need to reveal the kind of finer details of the input data that's gone into your particular part of the twin, part of the model. So I think one of the things we can do here, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. There are other sectors that have looked at these challenges and have begun to address them and to crack them to some extent. And so I think looking at things like the finance sector and maybe some of the data governance that exists around open banking could be an interesting place to look. And indeed, I think there are a few programs in the UK underway to look at applying those same sorts of principles to data sharing and governance in the energy sector. So I think there are routes around this, and this is really one of the things we should be aiming for in any kind of demonstrator of a digital twin for the energy system is actually putting some of these I suppose difficult use cases or interesting use cases into practice to sort of prove the concept.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to nip back to a couple of the points that you made earlier, Lucy, around the 4 use cases that you highlighted, because I guess one of the key questions is what kind of parameters need to be captured within the concept of a digital twin. I guess one layer would be just to capture the physical assets that are involved in the energy system. The next layer up might be to capture the operational data that flows through them. And then I guess the level up from that is trying to capture the economic parameters of the market, of the electricity market beyond that. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you've got thoughts on which of those use cases require what level of data and what level of complexity. Do we need to capture the whole of the market system? Because obviously, and to a large extent, the energy market is a market, mm-hmm. and what happens within the market is very much defined not just by the physical parameters, but by mm-hmm. the interest of the economic actors involved. Yeah. What's your take? Do we absolutely need to capture all of the financial economic parameters, or can we just do the physical parameters?
I think markets and people are critical. I think if you only look at the physical parameters of the system, I think you even today you have quite an incomplete model of the system. I think that will only become more true going forward. So I think absolutely the ability to capture the behaviours, the markets, and the formations and structures occurring around the retail side of the system are as important as the wholesale side of the market, and will just become more so in future. And in fact, if you look at some of the analysis that's come out of the Committee on Climate Change, they're absolutely clear in their SIF carbon budget how important the role of individuals, the role of people in the energy transition is going to be. And this is about people adopting low carbon technologies, but also maybe in some cases behavioural change as well. So a combination of the two things. So I think it's imperative that we have the ability to model people, households, and also perhaps the quirks of some of their behaviours, the quirks of some of their attitudes, how different behaviours diffuse through a system. All of these things, I really strongly believe that this whole retail side of the energy sector is going to see enormous disruption over the next decade or so, enormous innovation, and this will be driven by data. We will have a huge amount of data relating to this, and it's imperative that we really model that into any kind of attempt at looking at a digital twin of the energy system. If we don't do, then we're looking at a system where we have some huge gaps in our knowledge, and we're modelling a system which is maybe appropriate for the past, but certainly not an appropriate representation of the future energy system.
Exactly. Sarah, great to get your thoughts on this one. And what level of granularity do we need to go into for digital twins? Are there lessons that the energy system can learn from other parts of the National Digital Twin Programme here? Great to get your thoughts.
Sure. I think it depends what data you can get your hands on. So I see a change within the energy sector over the last few years. I think the Energy Data Task Force has made great progress here with Energy Systems Catapult and Ofgem in terms of sort of moving towards the idea of presumed open, so getting as much data out there in the public as possible. But we can't get, not all data about energy should be shared publicly, for obvious many, for security reasons, for commercial reasons. But I think, that question about granularity is you really have to work with what you can get. I think we're still in that demonstration stage around proving that digital twins will bring benefits and that they work, that that it's worth investing in this. And so when you're putting together these demonstrator projects, you're working with the art of what is possible now and what data you can actually access. So, for example, within the National Digital Twin Programme, we are developing a climate resilience demonstrator project, which is looking at sharing data across the energy sector, the water sector, and the telecom sector to be able to improve the level of resilience across those sectors to extreme weather events. So, for example, if there's a flood, we're looking at the data to see what are the interdependencies between those sectors, between those networks, that mean that if there is a flood, how does it impact that system? It's not just about the power going down, it's then about the communications network going down as well. And then, if the communications network is down for a couple of hours and runs out of backup, what happens if the communications network goes down for getting the power network and the water network back up? And what we're learning in putting together this project is, really the level of granularity of data that you need. People will always say, oh, give me all the data, I want it all. But in order to make these things cost effective in terms of, when we're putting digital twin together, you need to be able to access the right data. So I would say it's a process of learning by doing, and the level of granularity will really vary across digital twins.
So maybe it's the case that initially we won't necessarily achieve what you might call full digital twins initially. Maybe it'll be digital third cousins once removed or something like that, and over time we'll become more twin-like as we go, as the level of granularity and data increases. I guess one of the key questions is around the scope of such a digital twin for the energy/electricity sector. And I say a / because it feels like the electricity sector is expanding due to increasing demand and the interest in decarbonising other sectors using decarbonised electricity. So transport and heat, we're seeing increased demand for electricity industry too. Should we think about integrating these kinds of areas into an electricity digital twin initially, or should we just start with the core system and build outwards from there? Lucy, do you want to kick off with that?
Yeah, sure. So I certainly think it's important to incorporate. I mean, I suppose we would describe transport and heat as adjacent sectors to the power sector, to the energy sector itself. I think it will become hard to separate these sectors in future. We have a term in the industry, distributed energy resources, which is what we use to refer to things like, even an electric vehicle is essentially a battery on wheels, and solar PV, household level solar photovoltaic cells on your roof, for instance, and maybe if you have a household level battery. So these are all examples of energy resources which are distributed, which are in some cases down to the kind of individual household level, and these will play an important part in the energy system of the future. They have the ability, under kind of smart, intelligent conditions, to take power off the grids when there's an excess at certain times, to keep the grid in balance, and perhaps even to provide power back to the grid as well. So that behaviour will be important in the future for all sorts of reasons, but will also effectively help us have a more renewable grid. So there are some characteristics of renewable generation which are a little bit different from fossil fuels. In very simple terms, you could describe that as the fact that renewable generation is a little bit harder to sort of turn on and off at the moment. So if you think about something like solar, you can't sort of turn the sun on and off on demand. So you need to have an infrastructure that can respond to that can keep the grid in balance. And these things are very, these types of resources, electric vehicles and so on, are an important part of that sort of system. And so I think it's important to incorporate them within the scope of the system as well. I should also say I don't think that's a huge challenge. I certainly don't think it's any greater challenge than actually just the kind of what you might have described as the core of the system piece. And that's certainly we're focused on heat and transport as two of our first areas of research at the Centre for Net Zero. So we're developing some really quite detailed agent-based models of those two sectors.
That's really interesting. And I guess the interest in digital twins is partly down to the fact that we have this huge transition throughout the energy system as we go to net zero. So modeling and simulating what that different system could look like is increasingly important. We've got a couple of questions popping up in our chat box on the side here. If anyone does have questions that they want to ask, or that they think it would be great for the panelists to get their view on, please do ask them via Hopin, or Hopin, I think it's called. One of the questions that Stephen Browning has asked is partly around funding and how we get the R&D funding we need for the kinds of projects that we're talking about, for the federated model that we're talking about for digital twins. It'd be great to get both of your takes. I guess fundraising is always part of any project development. It would be great to get your thoughts on that question. Sarah, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it really depends who the benefits accrue to. So if purely commercial benefits, then you would expect the funding to come from those participating commercial partners within the digital twin, or whoever is directly benefiting from it. If there are wider, more external benefits, then there's an argument for government intervention and for government funding, or for research funding of some sort. And that's really what we've been focused on in the programme, in the National Digital Twin Programme. It all comes from, as I said, from the report, Data for the Public Good. Where there are these external benefits, then it makes sense to seek public funding for it. That is the argument for intervention. And I think this is something that's particularly unique about the way we're developing this in the UK, is we see that there is a role for government here in terms of funding the development of an ecosystem of connected digital twins. This isn't just something for the private sector, for industry to get on with, because these are benefits. There will be benefits if we can improve the way that we run our energy system in the future, and do it in a way that helps us meet the net zero targets. There's obvious public benefit there, and I think that's what we're really trying to show through the programme, is the government needs to support this kind of research and to grow this framework so that we can bring in the private sector and research with academia. It really needs to be all those parties working together, academia, government and industry, to make this happen.
That's a really elegant way of putting it. Lucy, great to get your thoughts on this, and perhaps more widely about the role of government in digital twins. I feel like there's a nascent area of digital architecture that is being developed in the energy system, and certainly in the UK, where the governance of it is very much up for grabs. And I think a lot of organisations would love to be at the centre of these kinds of projects. But how should they be governed? How should they be managed? And what is the role for government?
So I firstly concur with everything that Sarah said. I guess in terms of the role for government, I do think there is a role to make investments in innovation and small demonstrator projects, proof of concept projects. I think that's important. I think probably what I would say is that a lot of organisations are maybe incentivized or have some motivation to develop a twin, or a component of a twin which focuses on the part of the system that they're responsible for, maybe the part of the system that they own or maintain, or are responsible for operating in some shape or form. But as we've discussed in this conversation, the scope of future energy systems is extremely broad. It's going to incorporate consumers and households to a much greater degree than it does today. I think everybody's kind of part of the system is clearly going to be enhanced and made more useful by being able to interoperate with other people's contributions to this twin as well. So everyone, I think, is motivated to maybe to generate their own part of the twin, but perhaps not to go beyond that part of the system. So I think funding to help look at what kind of standards could be in place to help with interoperability, funding to support these projects I talked about, where maybe there are issues of data sharing or data governance, and just actually examining how two or more different organizations can create something that interoperates, where there is some kind of sensitive data involved, would also be useful as well. So I think that's where I think government should be focusing its attention.
Again, we come back to the word interoperability, which I think is fundamental to all of this. And I've been really struck by the fact that the model that I think both of you support is very much a federated model, where everyone is developing their own bits of a wider digital twin rather than a single project. And that's really struck me as something that I haven't perhaps heard with such force before. And because there are a series of organizations, certainly in the UK, developing what could be the nascent forms of a digital twin. We've got the energy system operator developing bits of a twin for the transmission system. Certainly the Energy Networks Association is developing a map of the system. So we've got different bits that could fit together. But as you say, it's the interoperability that will be key for all of this. I wonder if we can just close out with some final remarks and take-homes for the audience. If you wanted the audience to be left with a few, or perhaps one core message about digital twins and what next steps we all need to be taking to really push this forward, what would you want people to go away with? Lucy, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I think it's been the core of the conversation, really. I think the importance of data. I have spent a lot of time working in and around transport and mobility, and I think it's a great sector to look at here, because it has been transformed by the growing availability and access to data, and particularly real-time data, and that has meant all sorts of new products, new services, new companies have been able to be created over the past decade and more. And I think we will see that start to happen in energy, and that data being available will be the one of the really key things to supporting digital twin development and a whole bunch of other things happening in the energy space.
Fantastic. Sarah, how about you? What would be your take-home messages?
Okay, so just picking up on one of the comments in the chat, it is a coordination issue really as well, isn't it? It's bringing people to work together on a common objective. That's part of building a digital twin. We're finding that out in our climate resilience demonstrator project. It's really coordinating across different groups of people. That's a real important part of this. And I think systems thinking and stakeholder engagement, if we get those right, it can help us exploit the full potential of digital twins. And I think it is all about, as we're talking about here, it's about using data in the right way. I think we've got the means to do it. We really just need to get on and do it urgently. I think there are some pressing needs here. I personally think I don't think we can get to net zero without using connected digital twins. So we should just get on with it. I would like to mention again the Digital Twin Hub, and I'd really welcome everyone here to sign up to the Digital Twin Hub. It's a community resource. You can find out more about digital twins and chat to other people and network with other people working in the world of digital twins. So please sign up to that. We also run a Gemini call on a Tuesday, so you're welcome to join. This is an open program that we run. We welcome people to get involved. We will be posting some updates on the climate resilience demonstrator project in due course. So we hope to be able to share our lessons learned from that demonstrator project as we go. And we really look forward to hearing more from people about their experiences too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think my take home is this issue of interoperability and the federation of multiple digital twins coming together to form hopefully a comprehensive digital twin at some point in the future. I think that's a really fascinating opportunity that we can aim towards. I think it's one of those areas where there are lots of interests involved, and managing those and how we make sure that everyone's interests are aligned and work together is going to be key, and the governance structures that are required to do that, I think, will necessitate a role for government in the development of anything like this. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here is trying to optimize the system as it transitions to net zero, which is going to be require huge investment. And we spend billions upon billions of pounds on the hard assets required for this transition. And it sometimes feels like we don't invest sufficiently in the models and the digital architecture required to optimize those systems. So I think a bit of a plug for those kinds of digital systems as a way of optimizing the wider system and avoiding perhaps larger costs down the line of hard assets, I think is a key message that we can perhaps push further and faster. But all that remains for me to say now is first of all, thank you to our speakers, Sarah Hayes and Lucy Yu, for taking the time to participate today. Thank you all for joining this session and for listening. And thank you to the questions that have been asked. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Anushka. Thank you very much, everyone.
Pete, thank you so much. A huge, massive thank you from us all here for steering that wonderful conversation on digital twins. Thank you all for contributing to those questions. We love all that interaction from you all watching. Well, that was a great session, wasn't it, on energy transition, a digital twin for the energy sector. Our next session on the Planet and Smart City stage is about data-driven insights for the sustainability transformation. It's a hybrid event, so get yourself down to the stage in person if you're there at King's Cross. Otherwise, stay tuned here for the live transmission, which will be beaming its way around the world at 3 p.m. A little bit later at 4, I'll be back to interview Christopher Mason on the next 500 years, Engineering Life for Space, his fascinating new book. He's the former head geneticist at NASA, so we'll have some fantastic insights from him. So my name is Anushka. I'm here to take you through today's Planet and Smart City stage. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back broadcasting at 3 p.m. British Standard Time. We'll see you then.